Hello, everybody, and welcome to this lunch. I'm Fortune AI editor Jeremy Kahn, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this event. Today, we're going to be delving into the rise of Agentic AI and what it means for the world's knowledge workers. Is this the start of a new productivity boom or the beginning of a professional reckoning? I want to give a quick thank you to Accenture for hosting this conversation on one of the most pressing issues in the future of work. One housekeeping note before we begin. I want to remind everyone that these sessions are on the record. I'm going to start with some questions for our panelists, and then we'll get to some questions from the audience as well. We'll have some mics going around. I wanted this to try to be interactive as possible, to get you guys to react, share your experiences, ask questions of the panelists, and we'll take it from there. When we turn to audience questions, though, please note, raise your hand. We'll get you a mic, and then if you can stand up and sort of say your name and who you're from, that would be great. I want to introduce my panelists. Joining me in this conversation, and we'll go from the far end towards me, we have Ang Chewy, Assistant Chief Executive and Chief AI Officer at the Home Team Science and Tech Agency. We then have Mei Yap, Senior Vice President and CIO at Jabil. And last but not least, Dr. Ramin Tanati, lead for the APAC Center for Advanced AI at Accenture. Okay, and to get started, we're going to go to Ramin first. Accenture has found that generative AI is likely the most significant change to work since the agricultural or industrial revolutions. What do you see on the ground right now, particularly as we move into this era of AI agents? How is AI already changing the way professionals work, and where is it having the biggest impact first?
Sure. Yeah. Awesome question. Thank you, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch so far. It's new questions, by the way, so we have no idea what we're being asked. So I think, in Accenture, obviously, we work with a lot of different clients, different industries. We see a lot of different functions, and we support them with a variety of different consulting and technology change requirements. Generative AI, like with any tool, is only as good as how you implement it in the business. So, in some organizations, and I'm just going high level to low, they'll go and use ChatGPT as a tool to kind of enable them to support them do some basic functions. But in most cases, when organizations use technology in that way, you don't really maximize the most out of it. Now, where we're seeing real impact with generative AI, and maybe we'll get to this later on, and generative AI is a bit of an umbrella term for many different types of new AI technologies, but do remember it's just one tool in the broader toolkit in the machine learning and data science and artificial intelligence space. So I think where we see a lot of utility in using these technologies is where we start thinking about how you reinvent the process of someone's job and effectively then start to embed these tools within those various substeps of a process, or actually reinvent the overall process itself. So some great examples of this are in the banking functions or in banking organizations, local banks here globally as well that we work with. We're seeing a lot of transformation in kind of back office functions, as well as risk functions, where traditionally, for instance, individuals that work in a risk or a money laundering detection team would have to manually trawl through a lot of information, whether it's transaction records or maybe suspicious transaction reports, to be able to understand and decipher specific types of interactions between parties. Now, suddenly you can augment a lot of this work with the ability to reason across lots of documents with things like a large language model. So suddenly you speed up the cognitive capability of an individual to be able to look at lots of documents. So there's bits of things around optimization of a role that you can do as an individual. I think there's other areas as well where we're starting to see a lot of utility and function of these technologies, specifically in the engineering teams as well. And whether you believe that developers will be kind of defunct soon and AI coders will take over, there is definitely value and utility in bringing generative AI technologies and other flavors of those technologies to be able to support developers and engineering functions. In Accenture ourselves, we speed up a lot of our own development using these tools and technologies because they help us doing the mundane tasks. Whether you're a developer and you understand unit tests, you probably don't want to do that manually. You can do a lot of this using these techniques. So there is a whole flavor around optimization and productivity gain in these things. But there's also things about like unlocking value where you probably didn't have a business function before. So in many cases, small organizations that we work with where potentially they want to address new markets, but they don't have capacity in that market to work in. Maybe it's a language, maybe it's actually outreach. There is a lot of utility now in being able to use these technologies to work in a different context, different language, different culture, and speed up a lot of the process which manual effort would have to be put into previously. So I see a lot of value there. But I just want to take a step back as well as saying, again, these are tools in a toolbox. Right? And with anything, is how you bring them together in the business makes them usable. An organization could just use ChatGPT, or they could re-engineer their entire function with the right tools, and that's where the real value you can unlock. And that's how in Accenture we take that point of view.
And right now, are you seeing more of the former or more of the latter? Are there people mostly just saying, okay, we're going to take our existing process and we'll let people use ChatGPT, or we'll build an agent that does some little part of this existing process? Or are you really starting to see that whole re-engineering of workflows?
So we've done a few different reports, maturity reports, and like first-hand experience as well. You get both flavors. The ones which are experimenting with the tools like a ChatGPT or an on-premise version of a ChatGPT, they are doing pockets of experimentation. They're getting small value from it. But the ones which are very serious about real workforce, real enterprise transformation, are investing heavily in full transformation. That means technology, business process, workforce, and effectively engagement to their customers. In terms of the balance, I think probably, we're all friends here, probably 70-30. 70-30 experimenting, playing with the smaller tech. The 30%, the ones that are trying to leapfrog everyone else, are the ones doing full transformation.
Interesting. And one more question before we get to the rest of the panels. Are you seeing more, are you starting to see use of agents? And if so, are you seeing them in a sort of an assistant role for humans, or are you seeing them actually automating entire process?
Sure. So I think first is to demystify the concept of an agent. I think there's many different flavors. If you're a pure academic, you would think about agent-based computing, which is all about simulation. If we're in the modern world and looking at most LinkedIn posts, agents mean something else. To most people, if they think agents is automation. Agents is, to this room, is an AI program which can harness multiple tools. Some of them can be a large language model like a ChatGPT's model, OpenAI. Some of them can access APIs and all different things. So you can imagine if you have an agent in your organization, it can maybe mimic a human person's task. Maybe if you orchestrate lots of agents together, you can mimic a team's task or an organization or a function's task. Now, do we see organizations utilizing this? I think we do. Now, I think the problem is right now, most organizations take a business process step one to step N, and that could be, like I say, money laundering detection teams, or it could be onboarding a new client in a bank, or it could be something in public sector or whatever the industry is. And they replicate that business process with agents. And that isn't actually true agentic design. What you're actually doing there is automating sub-steps with maybe some computational process which could be driven by AI. And the way we look at things, and we have a methodology around this, we'd have to go into that in this panel, but it's about how do you reinvent the entire process. So you're no longer thinking about steps 1 to step N, you're thinking about the objective, the outcome of it, and refactoring it so that agents can go and decompose and solve that itself without mimicking existing processes. So to your question, there is experimentation. A lot of the experimentation, 95% of it is just mimicking existing business processes and calling it agents with a rubber stamp. But I think we can do way more. Okay,
well, we'll hopefully get into more of that in a minute. Chewy, I want to go to you. For those in the room who might not be from Singapore and might not know what the home team does and what HTX does, can you tell us a little bit about what the organization is? And then can you talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about using AI? I know you have a number of partnerships with leading AI model providers. How do you see that helping the agency?
Yep. Thanks, Jeremy, for the question, and thanks for having me here. Quick introduction about HTX. We are the Home Team Science and Technology Agency, a relatively young agency. We're celebrating our 6th birthday this year. It's an agency under the Ministry of Home Affairs. We support what we call home team departments for all their science and technology needs. So home team departments include the Singapore Police Force, the Singapore Civil Defence Force, which is our fire department and our emergency responders, Singapore Prison Service, as well as the Immigration and Checkpoint Authority. So among the 10 home team departments in total under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So we call ourselves the home team, these 10 departments, and we're responsible for your safety in Singapore. So that's what we do. And HTX is a short form for Home Team Science and Technology Agency. So we provide the science and technology needs for all these home team departments. So I think AI is not new to the home team, right? Traditional AI, I think things like image recognition, speech to text, we have been using that for quite a long time now, maybe a decade or more. So one example of that is if you were to go through any of our checkpoints, you would see only automated clearance lanes. So for that, there is iris recognition and facial recognition technology. Yeah, we have proliferated that now to all our checkpoints, including the land checkpoints. That's one example. But with the advent of ChatGPT in November 2022, right, we saw that actually Gen AI is a whole new type of capability that's much more general purpose. And we decided to embrace the adoption of AI with new vigor. And we launched what we call the Home Team AI movement in June 2024, so about a year ago. And we aim to establish a 500-strong AI workforce within HTX to support all of Home Team's AI requirements. So basically to proliferate the use of AI across the entire home team. So we've built up to about 200 strong scientists, engineers, and developers now, and probably will reach 500 in 1 or 2 more years. We don't do things in isolation. So within the 500 strong AI workforce, we have many AI product squads that are where we build many of these AI applications and components ourselves in-house. But of course, we don't work in isolation. Hence, partnership with key companies. We actually partner with all kinds of companies. So the big hyperscalers that Jeremy mentioned, to small startups, 10-person startups. Yeah, so I think in total, I think we partner with more than 50 companies within the AI movement. So examples with Microsoft and Mistral, we announced a partnership to build customized models, large language models, for our use. For Mistral, it's models that are fine-tuned off Mistral's models, as well as Microsoft's Phi models. So we also partner with NVIDIA for our infrastructure. So as most of you would know, we can't do any kind of model training, large language model training, fine-tuning, continuous pre-training without GPUs. So we partner quite closely with NVIDIA to build up our on-prem GPU cluster. We also partner with Accenture on, we are looking at Accenture's Agentic AI platform for our needs. We are starting to experiment with various Agentic AI applications. We also partner with Accenture to build up some product squads to help us build some of these AI applications amongst several other areas.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple specific examples of using sort of classical AI, computer vision, facial recognition at the border crossings to automate that clearance process. When it comes to these more recent generative AI models, can you talk, are there a couple of use cases you already have in deployment there, and are you seeing productivity gains? What are you looking at there? Are there a couple of specific examples you can give?
Yes, great question. So we went around all the different home team departments and we've collated more than 300 use cases. We are currently working on about 70 of them with the resources that we have, and we'll start rolling out some of these applications over the next couple of months. So one example of, there are several examples I can raise. One example of that is what we call an AI tool to help program management teams as well as procurement officers basically streamline the entire government procurement process. So the government procurement process, typically there are many different steps with many different documents that need to be generated, right. Evaluations and comparisons that need to be done. So we built this tool that we very aptly call paperwork because it's supposed to replace paperwork. Yeah. So the paperwork tool, we have actually already rolled it out, and various program management teams and procurement officers are using it, and it helps to reduce procurement time by about 30%. So we're continuously improving the tool. It's an agentic AI tool powered by agents driven by LLMs. So that's one example. There are other public-facing tools and applications that the various home team departments will actually announce over the next couple of months. So watch out for those.
All right, stay tuned, everybody.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, May, I want to get to you. Similarly, for those who might not be familiar with Jabil, can you talk a little about what the company does, and then how are you using AI right now to boost productivity? What are some of the top use cases you've seen?
Sure. So can you guys hear me? Yes. Right. So can I have a show of hands before I talk about Jabil? Who knows or heard about Jabil besides EJ? Anybody heard of Jabil? Okay, so it seems like we're the best kept secret, right? So we are a US manufacturing company, probably one of the largest with 30 billion of revenue, 140,000 employees. So we function out from 100 different locations, 25 countries. So this is the scale that we actually operate in. So we actually empower about 450 brands across the world, ranging from capital equipment, photonics that we talk about today, and then consumer products, healthcare product, medtechs, EVs. So basically spanning across 8 different industries, right? So that's what we do. And so we started the AI journey quite a long time ago, right? So think about us, we are a manufacturing company. So in the manufacturing world, there is actually, of course, there are robots, but on the other hand, there are also a lot of people, right? A lot of our, what we call the direct labors that's in the factory. Besides that, we also have what we call the indirect labors, who are the white collar people, right? So we started this journey where we actually started to look at one of the consumer products that we made is actually the phone, right? The phone that most people actually can't have, which is the fruit company that we can't actually work with, right? So when we actually work with them to actually manufacture the product, that is actually a very strong demand from us to say that, hey, every piece of product that you see, right, it needs to be dust-free, it needs to be dot-free, it needs to be scratch-free, right? It needs to be in pristine condition, right? So at that point in time, many of those products are actually made in China. So when you step into any of our China factories, you have thousands of people just sitting there looking at the phone, right? And what we call them are golden eyes. So they have their golden eye just staring at the phone, right? Like 8 hours a day. You repeat that, right? So you repeat that again and again. So 8 hours a day just to do the inspection. So immediately, one of the quick things that we actually did was to actually use AI algorithm to replace that whole inspection process, right? So replace is probably not the right word, because what we have done is we augment it with the golden eye, because at some point in time, the golden eye become not such a golden eye, right? There's error that will actually creep in after the 7 or 8 hours, right? So we actually use automation and AI algorithm together with what we call the smart engine to actually augment the inspection. So that's one very clear use cases that we actually apply. Then if I use the same example from the fruit company, right? So recently you actually see that, hey, the fruit company actually promote a lot of very fancy phones, right? It can be purple, it can be pink, it can be pastel green, right? So those are nice to have, but very difficult to produce, right? The quality of those products, you need the perfect formula to actually tell you that, hey, the amount of anodizing that you need to do, plus the amount of time, plus the amount of chemicals that you need to mix in, needs to come to that right precision. So we actually use a lot of machine learning algorithm to actually help us achieve that. So that's one example of computer vision, another example on machine learning. So if I actually fast forward to, like 2 years ago, right, when the whole ChatGPT, Gen AI actually caught on. So what we have done is right before that, we actually come to a great realization that, hey, there's too many AI POC or POV that's actually ongoing in 100 of my locations. So on one hand, I do not actually want to stop innovations. But on the other hand, how do I actually set up a good guardrail that I know what is going on, right? I know, when you create some good best practices, how do I make sure that that best practices, that AI algorithm can be applied to the other 100 other locations? So then we actually set up what we call the AI data and AI council, right? That we actually invite members, very senior members from each of the function, from HR, from procurement, supply chain, the manufacturing arm, the engineering arm, and we sit down together and we kind of own this data and AI council together to actually say, hey, we need to be really smart in what we want to invest on AI. So collectively, this council actually decide what are some of the projects that we want to work on collectively, right? So they need to actually be bringing value for us, value in terms of what's the ROI, what's the revenue, what kind of productivity can we actually achieve from every use case that we wanted to manage, right? And then we actually collectively decided that what will benefit most for Jabil is computer vision solution that I talk about, machine learning solution, and then last but not least, Gen AI, right? So when we started to embark on Gen AI, we are the #1 customer from Microsoft to actually sign the Copilot to actually, kind of try to actually adopt Copilot at that point. So at that point, it was even before the pre-GA, right, where they actually make the general announcement. So we actually get quite a few thousand licenses and actually start distributing to our people to actually say, hey, try it, right? It is going to help you in terms of helping you in terms of personal productivity, but that's not good enough, right? That's not good enough. That's productivity, AI for productivity. What's more important is how do I actually use Gen AI for enterprise? To very much to your point, right? How do I actually look at certain processes and start to transform them? And that's where we actually take a very systematic approach and also working with our partner to actually come back with a AI strategy, right? What is the right AI strategy for us? What are some of the agentic workforce that we can actually start to recreate, rechange our processes, rethink how we do it, and actually start to put agentic AI into our workforce. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Do you have an example yet of where you've been able to do that?
Yeah. So the way that we look at agentic is it's both horizontal and functional, right? There's a lot of common functionalities that we all have in a big corporation, in enterprise. Things like contract review, right? Everybody needs to do contract review. The finance needs to do contract review. The legal team needs to do it. Think about our factories that need to actually look through all the contracts, right? So contract review become a generic agent that we have actually created.
Right.
And then when we look at the specific one, right? So things that, one thing that was quite interesting that I think one of you guys mentioned, the subtle difference about agentic AI and RPA, right? I think people know about RPA is agentic is something that is goal-based. So you tell them that this is the goal I want to achieve, and you go figure out how to do it. Versus a RPA, which is task-based, right? You actually kind of use your process workflow and actually automate each of the tasks. So what we try to do is, hey, we look through all the RPAs that we have, right? So we have 100 over RPAs. So using the RPAs, how do we actually kind of redesign the processes for finance, right? The whole collection process, and actually redesign that through agentic.
Fantastic. That's fascinating. You mentioned ROI. ROI comes up a lot. There's this big issue around how you evaluate these systems, how you benchmark them. What is the level of productivity gain you want to see? And to the extent you have error rates, how do you compare those to human levels of error? There was some discussion this morning. I was actually Oliver Jay from OpenAI was saying he thinks like the big missing piece for a lot of enterprises is having the right evals in place. What are you seeing with clients on that? What are you seeing as best practices about how you should think about evaluating these systems?
Sure, really good question. So I look at it from, if I put my data science hat on, in two pieces, right? So you've got evaluation in the lab and evaluation in the world. And if you come from an engineering practice or you come from a data science or some statistical practice, you'll understand that there are formal evaluations that you need to apply to a model to a scenario to be able to assess whether that model performs in the way you expect it to perform. And in traditional, it may be like precision recall, it may be some other, nuanced technique to be able to say, is it summarizing well enough? Is it generating concept well enough against a baseline, a base data set? And most organizations, I'll put it out there, don't have enough data to create those baselines to begin with. So that's one of the biggest problems you'll face. Then the second part is, let's assume that you've managed to come to a level of agreement that this model performs in the way you expect it to perform. A good one would be you ask it to write an email, and the email that it produces is to the standard that you expect. And a human is probably going to evaluate this. Now you want to scale this out to production, right? Which basically means put it in the hands of end users to go and evaluate how well that tool uses. Before you can actually go and scale this out, and this is, I think what you made is spot on. You typically have a forum or a governance forum or some committee to understand what is the actual criteria of you developing a use case to go and deploy it. And that comes up through some governance process. And in that governance process, you should have already established some baseline, right? Some real world baseline that it takes a human to, in this case with the computer vision, 35 seconds to assess, with their golden eye thing. And now we want to improve on that. So now you have a baseline and you want to see how you can improve on that. The reality is most organizations that don't see success in deploying AI well is that they don't establish that baseline. They don't go and do the systematic exercise and say, hey, I want to, in the banking sense, I want to improve the onboarding process of a customer. How long and how many people and how many touch points does it take to onboard a customer? Mm-hmm. They don't have that statistic. So how do you then go and take a new system, bring it into production, and evaluate, is it better or not? Does it save me money? Does it save me time? Does it improve the customer experience? The challenge is how do you systematically create that baseline? And that is through, like you just mentioned, having the right strategy, having the right governance in place, and having the teams bought in that they're going to bring this technology and bring it to life. So real world, one thing, in the lab is another. And just to add to this, because I love complexity, we work in a world where these systems are now exposing organizations to risk. Those risks come through simple things like giving an end user the wrong recommendation or telling an internal system, if it's an internal agentic flow, to make a decision on something when that decision could lead to a catastrophic event. And if you don't have the right risk measures in place as well, all of those other things just fall apart. So I think there's a lot of complexity in this. For sure.
Yeah, Chewy, how are you looking at this at HTX? Because obviously you're helping government systems. There needs to be a high degree of trust in what the outcome of government decisions is and government processes. And also some of the things you do are high impact, high risk. So how are you looking at that evaluation?
Yeah, great question. So I'll approach it from in the same manner that Ramin did. So there is from a model perspective and from an AI application perspective. So from model perspective, just now I mentioned that we are developing our own customized large language models, right? So we have a LLM AI R&D team that develops these LLMs. So the very first thing that they would do is to come up with a benchmark. So so the benchmark that we came up with is for basically the Singaporean context, because that's the environment that the LLMs will be deployed in. And we have a benchmark also for the home team context, which we call home team lexicon. So all the terminologies, familiarity with internal home team terminologies, standard operating procedures, concept of operations, etc. So that's the first thing that we do. And then when we recently launched our own small model, Phoenix Small, our own LLM, that is customized for home team and Singaporean context, and it performs well on our own benchmark. So without the benchmark, we wouldn't know how well it performs relative to other models like Llama or Mistral Small and so on. So same for speech-to-text model. So we also customize our own speech-to-text model. Again, we first come up with the evaluation. So the evaluation based on local street names, local accent, and so on and so forth. And of course, the way that Singaporeans speak, sometimes we like to code switch between English, Mandarin, English, Malay, and so on and so forth. So the benchmark needs to be developed first before we know how well the model performs, right? So that's important to do for models. Evaluation benchmarks is very important. Then for AI applications, you're right that some of the applications that we deploy might be mission critical. So in terms of ROI for AI applications, we look at it from, in terms of performance, right? I'll talk about performance of these AI applications before I talk about risk, because we look at both. So any AI applications that come up, generally in terms of ROI, we think of it as falling into 3 baskets. One is those AI applications that improve mission outcomes, which means an example of that is with the AI application, we can do things that we couldn't do before. So improving mission, like solve new kinds of crime and respond to new kinds of emergency situations, etc. So second category is it improves employee productivity and experience. And third category is improve citizen experience. So there are some applications that improve mission outcome, but doesn't really improve employee productivity, right? And some that improve citizen experience, but doesn't improve employee productivity. So yeah, and because we are a public sector organization, the citizen part and the mission part is important. But the productivity part, there are applications that we are developing that improves employee productivity significantly. So some of them we are looking at like a 200% increase in productivity. Some of the information extraction from documents, that kind of tasks like certain speech to text tasks. Actually, we see like 200% improvement. So what this means is that, for instance, you have 60 people working on something now. In the past, in the future, with the AI application, you only need 20 people.
Right.
So that's a significant improvement in terms of ROI.
Right.
So that's from a performance perspective. So for AI applications, before they roll out, we also look at it from the risk perspective.
Right.
So there are a few different categories of risk that we run, that we get the development teams and the operational home team department to run through and think what is the worst case scenario under each of these risk categories. Like an example of risk category is bodily harm, right? In other words, like financial loss. Right. So different categories. And then what are all the measures that we can put into these AI models or AI applications? Guardrails, content moderation, various kinds of guardrails that can be used to mitigate the risk. And then, of course, there will be a residual risk. But the residual risk would be made aware, and of course, to senior management. And of course, if the residual risk is higher, then the acceptance of the risk will have to be done at a higher level. Yeah. So this is the approach that we are taking before AI applications are rolled out.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. One more question before we go out to the audience. I want to go to May and switch gears a little bit. You talked about you try to get everyone using generative AI in the company and doing lots of experimentation, but then you have this high-level council that's going to decide on the big use cases that you kind of roll out company-wide. I'm curious, how this has all gone over with employees. You have a lot of employees throughout the company, and how have you tried to bring people along to make sure that they're comfortable with this? Because I think there is a lot of fear on the part of employees. Oh, this technology is going to put me out of work. It's going to take my job, or I don't know how to use this. I'm afraid to use this system. How have you tried to deal with the training question so that you actually do get the productivity gains you want to see?
Yeah. So I think for Jaber, it is very clear, right? Everything that we do, transformation that we do, we put people at the heart of everything, right? We design around the people. So I was very careful with the word that I use. I don't say that I replace my people. I don't replace my golden eye, but I actually augment it. Because to me, it is very clear, right? So let's take, for example, the people who is actually working in the shop floor, right? Business is good. So we always know that we can actually retrain our people so that they evolve from just a golden eye. They can now become a technician that knows how to operate the robots to actually automate the automations work, right? So we actually have very systematic training programs that actually bring them in the shop floor into the next level of technician, right? Working from what we call the direct labor to super DL, right? Super direct labor. I think EJ, my colleague from here, from Penang, I think we are doing it really, really well. And we see the super DL actually evolve to become engineers, right? So that's one way that we're doing it. But I think more importantly, the other approach that we do, like what you say, we have 140,000 people. While we are actually going through this transformation itself is scary, right? When you hear about the word transformation, people don't like it, right? So regardless of what kind of transformation, as long as you use that word, it is scary, right? So what we have put in place is AI literacy program, right? So the AI literacy program is actually put into every employee when they come on board, right? So they know that, hey, they need to actually first go through what is the AI policy that we have institutionalized, what can be done, what not to be done, right? So don't ever put your model up into the internet. That's a no-no. Don't use ChatGPT. You are only allowed to use the tools that the company actually provide to them, right? So that's one way, training them and educating them to actually use AI responsibly, right? So everybody have to actually sign off on the AI policy. So that's one way, right? But that is more like a stick. So the carrot of it is that, hey, we make everybody go through, we actually encourage people to actually sign up on, live program that we talk to them, right, in different languages to actually promote all the use cases. We make all the use cases that we have available on the SharePoint so that, you can actually go in to look at it, right? For engineers who are actually keen to actually do what we call the engineering playbook, knowing what are some of the engineering practices that we can actually learn from what we have accumulated, those are made available for people, right? So that's one way of it. The third way of it is we actually introduce, besides the AI literacy, it's also a lot about data literacy, right? So data is the foundation of everything. So while we teach them on AI terminology, we also teach them on data terminology, right? So what does data lineage means? What does data owner means? The whole, I think it is actually quite a complex process, but we feel that it's important for them to actually kind of understand the correlation between AI and data. So we have data, we have AI, but more importantly, one thing that we actually realize, and it's very important to know, is that, while AI may actually augment their work away, so one thing that will not take them away is, the general skill sets that we talk about, the good leadership traits that we talk about. So those are some of the soft education that we actually also roll out and actually tell them that, hey, these are actually, no matter what job you are, it is important to keep that.
Great. Fascinating. I want to go out to the audience here, and please raise your hand if you have questions or comment you'd like to make responding to anything that the panel has said. And if people are too shy, I will carry on. But I want to try to get you all involved. Who's got a question or a comment they'd like to make based on what they've heard? Oh, there we go. We've got somebody with their hand up, a brave soul there. Please, if you could tell us who you are and what's your question?
Hey folks, my name's JJ and I run a AI software company. This question's more for Accenture, but I think it's to everybody. Like, in a world where Gen AI is obviously so new and a lot of the consulting organizations are trying to win work, would you typically see as reasons why a particular vendor gets picked over the other? And where have you seen sort of more success versus other places or not?
Sure. Very loaded question. I will take my Accenture hat off for a second and just play the broad consultancy observer hat. I think there is a number of different, let's talk about from a technology implementation pursuit perspective to begin with. I think there are multiple ways consultancies, solution integrators, whatever you want to call us, the likes of Accenture, are trying to optimize the costs effectively that they serve to the client. And I think the most successful way so far is integrating generative AI or tools which utilize generative AI or other AI techniques to speed up delivery, speed up implementation, like being able to implement a technology, whether it's from scratch or maybe integrating various different enterprise solutions, but also reducing the footprint that it takes to get that done. Right, and that's the reality of it. There's a finite number of resources that you need to build something, and there's a finite amount of time that you apply to make that delivery happen. So I think that's one angle, right? So from a pure implementation side, and for sure, the leading, including Accenture ourselves, a lot of our delivery models now are thinking about that whole agent as a workforce model, right? We call them the AFT, like an agent full-time employee. So that's really important, one. Then the other side of the thing is more around the consultancy side. Now, consulting, whether we like it or not, I think is here for a long, long time. And I say it because, yes, you can go and get agents to go and build a bit of technology, but to actually implement change and bring it to people, there is a lot of hand-holding and workforce change that is needed to make that happen. there is also a lot of work that goes on into, as I think as May's comment, setting up strategy, which resonates and reflects your business and your industry to actually enable that change to make sense. Now, where consulting agencies, your top houses in the world are taking advantage of Gen AI tools, it's helping them accelerate a lot of the work in the research space, being able to come up with ideas, formulate ideas, present them in a far more refined, quicker fashion. For sure that's happening, and that's an in-house capability that most leading strategy houses and Accenture are using as well. I think, I won't name names, but you've probably seen LinkedIn posts around how some of the top strategy consulting firms have built their own tools to be able to support research, desk research, as well as deeper research. So absolutely, I think there's two facets to it. There's technology enablement, speeding it up, less people. There is consulting, broader research, speeding up that piece as well. I think finally, if I just reflect internally, similar to what May said as well, Accenture, every single 850,000 employee has to go through training in using these technologies. And that's independent whether you're a business analyst, an intern, a delivery lead, a technical architect, a developer, or someone that's an internal function. Everyone is using these technologies. And that ultimately makes the organization more efficient, and then you can deliver better value to the client. So I look at those three pillars.
Interesting. Great. Other questions or comments? There's a woman.
Hi, this is Deepika from IDC.
Yeah.
I just have a question around, we've seen that the maturity of Asia organizations around adopting AI has been fairly low, and they've clearly, they've just trying to pivot to AI and pretty much in, early stages of adoption. What I want to hear from you is, Accenture, how are clients approaching you apart from these productivity use cases, these functional use cases? Any clients or any industries who are trying to drive adoption for core industry use cases, right? Not just functional use cases. I just want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think really good question. So I think the challenge is, firstly, I would just comment on the adoption of AI. I actually do think clients have been adopting AI, depending on how you mask that term, for many, many years. People have been calling AI separate from machine learning. But to me, AI is an umbrella term. It includes descriptive analytics, your advanced analytics, which is effectively presenting stuff into dashboards and using that for managerial forums, all the way to machine learning for examples like on the manufacturing line, to now more advanced things in the AI and generative AI space. So I think there has been adoption. I think it's just the terminology which are being used sometimes is misleading when it comes to reports. I think that's number one. Now, in terms of core functional, beyond productivity gains, which is basically allowing an employee to do more, to do faster. And actually, I think in most cases, and this is reflective upon all the clients that we work with, if you give clients users, end users, employees to give a tool to do things faster, yes, they do it faster. Are they more productive? Probably not. Because actually, they do things faster and then go for more coffee breaks.
Right.
That's the reality on the ground, right? And it's because you haven't reinvented the work. So if you reinvent the work, suddenly those coffee breaks don't become meaningful anymore because you're actually doing something else. So I think the reason why adoption has been somewhat low in most cases is because they don't think about reinventing the work. And that was pretty much my first comment to all of this, is that if you don't reinvent the work and reinvent the way the process is run or the organization thinks of a function, you don't end up with great adoption.
Yep.
Now, I think there are, I see a few different clients, or should I say industries and clients in those industries where real reinvention is happening. One definitely in APAC is the telco space. Hugely. I mean, they're reinventing themselves as an organization from becoming a telco provider to mobile phones, whatever it may be, from broadband, et cetera, networking services, to actually providing infrastructure as a capability to clients. So that's a complete reinvention of what they are. You look at Singtel, you look at large data centers, you look at Telkomsel and the IOH in Indonesia, they're reinventing their entire business, right? They're thinking about how do they provide localized support for localized businesses in their country to be able to serve their local clients. And that's mainly because of clients don't want to be using US servers to host their data or hosting computational processes. That's one. So there's reinvention there. Yeah. There is absolute reinvention in the financial services industry as well. There's implications because of cost. People are expensive from call centers to back office functions, etc. But they're also reinventing the way the customer experience is effectively tackled. So I always use the onboarding example as a great one for this, because it takes, if you're a private wealth bank, it could take up to 6 months to onboard a client. If you're a retail bank, it maybe can take up to 3 weeks, which to me is unacceptable in the day we live in. Unacceptable. Why does it take 3 weeks to open up a bank account when Elon Musk can do an M&A in 1 week? Doesn't make sense, right? Yeah. So we need to rethink that. And a lot of the banks are reinventing the way they think about how you interact with a customer, reinventing that entire process to allow a client to be onboarded in 1 day. Because ultimately, a lot of the process that you go through is manual checks and balances in terms of forms, source of wealth, validating you're not a terrorist, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. All of that can be automated, or at least processed using in a different way. So I think there is change. I think there is also misalignment in the terms, but I think it has to get better, right? I think there's just a couple of examples.
Interesting. There were some other questions from down here. If we can get the mic to this lady here.
My name is Faith, and I'm from Accenture. I'll give Ramin a break for now and direct my question to Chewy from HTX. So thank you for sharing, some of the stories of how HTX is adopting AI. I'm keen to understand what are the key challenges that you and your team actually faced on this journey, and what steps you took to overcome them.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Great question. There are many challenges, right? So the many challenges. One is getting people. First is to get the buy-in, right? I mean, to get the resources to build up an AI workforce, and the investments needed took actually a lot of persuasion. We get strong support from our leadership in the ministry to embark on the AI journey. Because I think if you look at the Singapore government, generally the Singapore government recognizes that AI is going to transform the way that we transform everything. And we have to embrace it, right? We have to understand it, we have to embrace it while managing the risk and making sure the governance is in place. So, but still, when you want to get headcount in government, it's difficult. So those in government in Singapore know that it's very difficult. So first step is to really convince the leadership that we should invest at this scale and to really transform all the departments within the home team, and to transform the way that we deliver services, public safety services to Singapore, to people who live in Singapore. So I think that's the first step. Second step is in building up the workforce. It's not easy for us to hire at such a rapid clip. I think we have hired at a pace of about, it's not 20 plus a month. So generally, because Gen AI is very new, it's very difficult to find people in Singapore who's familiar with the technology and has done something related to it before. So what we do is that we hire people with adjacent skill sets. We hire all kinds. So we have AI engineers, we have developers, front end, back end, product managers, project managers, people doing governance. So all kinds of people with different roles that we're hiring for. So we look for people with adjacent skill sets. We don't require that they have direct experience, but the thing is they come in, and we believe that the best way to learn is by doing. So as they do the work, of course they need to have resources to do the work, which is why we went ahead to acquire GPUs, right? So for the engineers, actually, without GPUs, just for context, actually, we require on-premise GPUs because of the sensitivity of some of our data. So we can't just use cloud resources freely. Mm-hmm. So that's why with the infrastructure, with the resources, then people can start to build stuff, and through building, they actually learn and they get better over time. So hiring people, getting them to start doing the work, forming the team. So that's difficult. At one point in time, getting GPUs itself was difficult, but I think it's since become a bit easier. I'm sure there are many other challenges that I missed out, but just to give you a sense. Yeah.
That's great. I know there was at least one more hand up, several more. How about the gentleman in the greenish or bluish shirt there?
Hello. Yeah, hi. My name is Arun. I run a tech operations consulting company. So my question is to all three of you. With AI, Agentic AI, and AFT, what is the manpower reduction you're seeing in your organization in the next 18 months? And if you're going to say no, will the current manpower allow you to have higher revenue in absolute numbers or better bottom line in terms of percentage of top line? Thank you.
Interesting. All right. Well, we just heard from Chewy, so I'll give you a break to answer that last, maybe. But May, how about you? I mean, you've got 140,000 people right now in the organization. What's it look like going forward?
Well, again, I need to be really careful about that, right? So I think all the industry studies that we have seen and vendors that we've spoken to tell us that we should look forward to a 20 to 30% of headcount consolidation. So that's probably the benchmark that I'm working towards.
That's a very honest answer. That was good. Ramin, what are you seeing both in Accenture itself, maybe, or then also with across clients?
I think May made the statistically around 20-30%, but I would say the caveat is what the approach we're taking, and many organizations are taking as well, is that it's reskilling. A lot of the work that we actually do is reskilling. So, I mean, Chewy made a great example is that, you bring people in with adjacent skills and you get them to work on projects and they learn these things. And in the same way, a great example is we do a lot of software development, the SDLC process, supported by some of our own internal agentic capabilities, which effectively, underneath the hood, allows developers to move faster and do the stuff that they don't want to do. Which actually means that a tester, which typically is quite a low-value task, right? It's someone that goes through source code, even though it's super important, is very mundane, it's very repetitive. It's something that I don't want to say you can automate, but you can definitely use tools to actually support that. Their skills are now being uplifted to do other things. So whether it's supervisory work or they're learning other skills which allow them to support higher order tasks in the development cycle. So 20-30% for sure, but it's mostly, we're not looking at it from a kind of consolidation. It's more about a reskilling and being able to build a broader skill set.
Will you hire as much? I mean, that's the other thing, because people are looking at scaling, much faster from the same labor force.
We're hiring even faster.
Oh, okay.
Hiring even in Singapore. I was impressed by Chewy's numbers. Actually, 20 a month is fast. So we find it hard to get really top talent. To be honest, it's tricky. But in Singapore, we've set up a development hub, an engineering hub. And we're hiring specifically for the roles around advanced engineering, advanced AI engineering, et cetera. So we're hiring just as much as before, if not more.
Right, interesting. And Chewy, I know government's a little different how you think about size of workforce and things, but what are you looking at as this technology moves forward?
Well, I think the size of the workforce within Ministry of Home Affairs, I think it won't change significantly, even when we roll out AI. Because I think the manpower that's kind of freed up by the introduction of AI would be rewrote and reskilled, to Ramin's point. Because actually, there are many new challenges that we face, right? Like all new kinds, scams, cybercrime, all kinds of new challenges that are rapidly evolving. And some of these are the result of AI. Like scams are becoming much harder to detect because of generative AI. So we will be redirecting some of the manpower savings to some of these tasks, which require actually humans to deal with new kinds of challenges, whereas the AI can take up perhaps the more routine kind of tasks. Yep. So that's how I would see it. Yeah.
All right, we're running low on time, but I know there's one more question. Let's see if we can get to it quickly and get an answer. The gentleman in the back.
Okay, my name is Li Gang. So I help companies design their AI solutions. Right, so one question is on agentic, right? The use of agentic workforce or agents, autonomous agents. I think one of the a few key challenges that I think companies face is usually it fails a lot. It's not that reliable. Then there's a lack of accountability and transparency. Right, so regarding this, right, how would you address that? How would companies then use such technology using agentic solutions for mid or even higher risk or mission critical kind of processes?
Ramin, what do you, because you're probably helping lots of clients try to implement these, and I do think anyone who's played around with an AI agent notices that they're not that reliable at first. And so the question is, how do you put them into a process where either they are more reliable or there's some way of dealing with the unreliability so it doesn't create risk for the organization?
Sure. So I think to begin with, I think what Chewy said upfront, you need a risk materiality framework, which is effectively understand the level of risk and the risk appetite that your organization is willing to accept when thinking about the use cases which agentic or generative AI or any form of machine learning system should be used in, right? Because there are deterministic systems which will do exactly what they say will do on the tin every single time, and there are probabilistic systems which are anything to do with machine learning or data science-driven techniques. Now, in most clients that we've seen, mission-critical systems typically do not go down the agentic or the AI-driven space. They go down deterministic, model-proofed, verification, spec-safe, right, approaches. Yep. Aircrafts are one of them, right, for sure. Now, where there is a level of acceptance that maybe you use agentic AI or some generative AI system that powers something to do it, where it's like a mid-level risk, a lot of the time it's human in review or human over the loop. So a good example would be, I always go back to this, but money laundering detection systems. Now, typically what these systems look for, they look for topologies, patterns of interaction, and then ultimately it raises alarm bells when there are certain types of transactions of certain types of wealth, or there are interactions between known individuals, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you could potentially just automate that entire workflow and send it to the Singapore Police Force, right? And the transaction, that entire report goes to police, and then it alerts, and then they have to go and do a review. However, that's probably too risky to achieve because it's a non-determinist system. So we always recommend a human in review or human in the loop to do that. So, there's a lot of complexity in the question. It really is a reflection of the risk appetite of the organization, the understanding of the problem statement that you're trying to solve, and then the ability to put the right level of human control within that system to ensure that if things go wrong, which they will go wrong, that you have the right level of interception in place to stop that happening. Now, there is obviously scenarios where there are lower levels of risk, which you can just accept. And in those cases, and this is common, you usually start with that in an internal application and expand out to customers. You typically would have some ability to capture feedback of where things are going wrong and try and review, improve, fine-tune, whatever the approach you're taking to improve that system. Now, again, these comes through the appetite of the organization.
Great. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all so much for listening. I want to thank my panelists. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you again to Accenture for hosting this.